Karl Hughes, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Good to be here, Will. Thanks for having me.
Karl, you bought a podcast production agency. I am going to try to avoid using the word meta in this conversation, which is happening on my podcast. We'll see how I do. But we're going to hear your story of buying this business. And we are going to explore the concept of productized services, which is a category of business that digital entrepreneurs know well, but people who are focused on more sweaty offline businesses may be less familiar with. Before we get into it, Karl, let's start off with some background on you, please.
Sure. Yeah. So after college, I was a software engineer for a couple early stage startups here in Chicago, where I moved to. And in that process, I was the first employee actually, like twice. And that was a really great insight into like what it takes to run a small business. Now, these were companies that were raising angel and VC money. So it was a little different than, starting your own business from scratch or bootstrapping, but certainly gave me a good insight into what founders deal with and kind of got me on this track of entrepreneurship. And then about 3 years ago now, I started my first business called draft.dev that does technical content marketing aimed at software engineers. So it's a super niche thing. It obviously, like my background in software engineering, plus I enjoy writing, that kind of like made it a good fit for me as a first business. And then it took off really quickly. And so the kind of backstory and how this fits into the podcast production agency, because they are two separate companies. We didn't like buy them and merge them together. But basically about a year and a half ago, I was starting to reflect as the company was growing, my team was getting more mature and kind of taking on more of the day-to-day stuff. I was kind of thinking like, what do I want to do with myself? And I was toying around with the idea of maybe selling the business and then figuring out something else or doing something completely different, like writing a book just for the heck of it and see, take some time off. And I realized though, as I was thinking more and more, like I really wanted to build something bigger than just this one, very niche productized service or online service business. But I wasn't sure exactly what to do. And then I kind of got into the ETA crowd through, I guest speak at Northwestern University every quarter with their MBA program. And so I got to know some people going through that and going through the ETA. And I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. Maybe that's something I could look into. And, I'm sure like a lot of your listeners kind of snowballed. I read Build or Buy Then Build, and I got to go to the ETA conference last year, and I started to research, and we can get into all that stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Well, Northwestern and its neighbor, University of Chicago, Booth Business School there are two, particularly Booth actually, are two big names in the ETA space. The conference you were at was probably the joint conference that those two schools do, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. And let me just, let's just hear a little bit on the business that you founded, which is, just to repeat again for the audience, a content production agency, written content, SEO content, but targeted at developers. So this isn't your, top 5 coffee machine content. This is content that does have to serve the purpose of SEO, but not only. It's got to actually, have credibility with the developer audience, and anybody from the world of tech knows that developers are a finicky, grumpy bunch, and so they can sniff out BS. So it's really you got to really be producing good stuff, really good content, and really understanding your audience well. Can you give us some bullet points on the size of this business today?
Yeah. So, the first year I started, it was like, it was like half year, and I was just doing it half time as I was transitioning out of the last job I had. So we did 50K in revenue, something like that. And then the next year we did $1 million, started to hire a team, really started to like think about how this thing would grow, started to like hire a salesperson, get out of the day-to-day there. And then last year in 22, we did 2.5 million in revenue. And so, it's not huge by any means as a service business goes, but because we've, we're online, and what we offer we're all remote, and we're very process driven, and what we offer is very contained, this very specific service offering. It's not like a freestyle consulting, we do everything for everybody type business. It's a lot easier to sort of make that into a repeatable service that you can hire and put other people in place to run. So my team now does most of the day-to-day work there. And I was able to do that pretty quickly because I was very intentional about it. Just knowing myself, I get bored quickly. So I was really trying to build a business, and that was one of my big constraints, like build a business that I could take a month off of and it wouldn't fall to the ground. And so I did that last year when my son was born. That was really an awesome kind of test of how the team has gelled, how the company works without me. It was really great to see everybody kind of excel and do their own thing without me having to be in every call or overseeing everybody on a daily basis.
Well, Karl, that's powerful for a number of reasons. First of all, congratulations on starting a successful business from scratch. Congratulations on rapid growth, which I'm going to circle back to. Congratulations on having the foresight to make it something where you can step out of. I avoid the word passive income, but
yeah, it's never
a systematic business where there's less, everything is, there's just more systematized, is a more less headache. I mean, there's countless benefits to that, all of which my audiences will already know. There was something else I was going to say about that. How are margins in a business like this, by the way? Can you share that?
Yeah. So typically, it can vary quite a bit in these kind of service businesses. And draft.dev going through that quick growth, I actually think our margins were worse as we were growing fast than they will be as we level out. Sure. And so I think last year it was really like a net margin around 15 to 20%, which isn't terrible. I mean, it's not bad at all, but a lot of that went reinvested into buying the new company. And so you kind of I didn't take home nearly as much as I could have if I had just said, well, I'm just going to own this one thing and hold it, right? And that's one of the big trade-offs. And then one of the big things that I think a lot of small business owners are afraid of when they think about expanding is how much it costs to reinvest into, say, buying another company, right? Or even starting another service line or whatever you do to build up. So you have to be willing to take that short-term hit to hopefully build something bigger in the long term.
Well, that's a great point, Karl, and it's one of the things when business buyers who are younger are out there looking at businesses for sale and talking to sellers, and it's like the seller hasn't really done anything to grow their business in 10 or 15 years, and it's easy to kind of look down your nose at that when you're young and hungry and not risk averse and aren't putting kids through college. But once businesses get to, there are kind of stair steps and tiers in business. And once you get to a certain tier in whatever, a plumbing business or a crew business, taking it to the next tier is not incremental. It requires a big investment and a lot of risk.
And a mindset shift and hiring people that cost six figures and more. There's all these things. So I joined Entrepreneurs Organization last year as well as the company was growing. And EO, it's a great group of people that have started small businesses. You have to be over $1 million in revenue. So the nice thing there is you kind of get out the people who are just like wantrepreneurs or just kind of just getting started. And you get to people who have real companies. And a lot of the guys in there are 20, 30 years older than me with 20, 30-year-old businesses, and it's learning from hearing from them, when they're taking home $500,000, $1 million a year in cash flow, and that's what they want to just that's kind of their lifestyle they now support. They don't, they're not thinking about reinvesting in the same way somebody in their 30s is. And it makes sense, right? That's logical. Right. I don't fault them for that, right?
Yeah.
But when you are young, it's really important to use leverage the energy and the timeline that you have. I got a long time to fix these companies if I buy something and screw it up. Yeah. Whereas, if you're 60, you don't have that luxury.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on this point about growth, Karl, let's shine the spotlight back on you on growth. Yeah. You're growing this thing like crazy. $50,000 the first year, which is obviously not even a full-time salary. Right. $1 million and then $2.5 million.
Yeah.
You already said that you get bored. You know yourself, you get bored. But when you're growing like that, Karl, I mean, is that already boring to you? I mean, you didn't want to give it a few more years to get it to 5 and 10 million on that trajectory?
That's a good question, Will. So it's less that it's boring in the day-to-day and more that the business I'm intentionally designing the business so it doesn't need me as a full-time player. And so every time, what I do, I have a system that I've always done since I was even a CTO at startups where I track my time and I bucket it into different categories. And I see when any of those categories starts to get large and it's not really essential for me to be doing it. How do I find someone to do that thing? Because that's now holding me back or holding the business back from growing. So in other words, in the early days, it was, I tracked my time on marketing, on sales, on actual product delivery and overseeing. And eventually I got to this point where I'm like, I'm spending 4 hours a week on or 4 hours a day on writing and editing. And I don't want to do that. That's not the best use of my time. Right. So I hire writers and I hire an editor. Now I'm spending maybe, 30 minutes checking over their work a day, but then I've got all this time freed up for sales and growth. So I took that systematic approach. Every month or so, I kind of reevaluated my time spent, and that's how I reinvested into hiring and figured out how to get myself out of things. And honestly, here's the thing about growth. A big part of it is getting out of your own way. Now, I'll say that like part of the reason for draft.dev's rapid growth was just the market demand. I mean, you can't deny that. Like nothing grows that fast in a service business without very like offset or is a sort of like mismatched market demand and supply, right? So there's just no way around that. That was a big part of the driver. And that's actually slowed down a lot this year. So we're going to have a lower year because tech is just a little bit wonky at the moment and VC funding is way down. So, you've got to you have to accept that the external like things in the market can really screw with your business, like it or not. But at the same time, you do as an operator have to be able to step away and like delegate really effectively and just keep an eye on the numbers as they come in and readjust as you go. So that's where it got to. And so it wasn't that I was bored with the company or couldn't have spent more time or couldn't spend more time on it now. It's just that I didn't want to design a job for myself. I wanted to design a business that runs ideally without much input from a leader. Now, eventually I think we will hire like a GM or a chief operating officer to kind of run all the day to day. And I'll get to a point where I can just look at a monthly sort of spreadsheet of metrics and just keep up with that person maybe on a weekly and monthly basis. But in the short term, I mean, you don't need a full-time 40-hour-a-week visionary in a small business like that. It's just not, there's not 40 hours of work because I could dream up a million ideas, but I don't have the people and the size to justify pursuing 30 million different things.
Really interesting, Karl. Well, you talk about your kind of the supply-demand imbalance being it's what private equity types call tailwinds, right?
Yeah, right.
So you had these incredible tailwinds, but you deserve credit for perceiving them and jumping on the opportunity. So that's not to take away from the fact that you built something fast. It's you got out there in front of a tailwind and let it scoot you along.
Yeah,
good for you on that. But also I do have to. So, but did you have an audience or anything? That you were able to market this to, or a network to get that initial revenue, or was it pure? I mean, still with strong tailwinds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like
you still have to get
$1 million in your first full year. Like that's and really a lot of business,
right? And not even if you even take out the revenue numbers, just look at the kind of brands we work with now. We've worked with like huge publicly traded companies in just 3 years, 3 years of operating to get to that level where we get enough trust and credibility to work with them. Is like. It's really tough. Like, honestly, that I was most nervous about that when I was thinking about how do we go up market and kind of get our prices up and get like our margins better and stuff. Anyway, so I did not have like a ton of like connections in this space, but I did have a couple things going for me. One was I was a developer who could write. And so I went out to all the companies that I knew had programs where they would let guest writers come in and write on their engineering blog. And I started reaching out to them, just listening to what they do. So for example, I got on the phone with a company and this guy was super transparent. He walks me through like the whole model and the margins and the way it works for them. He's like, we pay a writer $700 to write a blog post. We pay an editor $200-$300 to edit it at most, maybe less. And then we get it published. And a typical blog post brings us $10,000 worth of business over its lifetime. And I'm like, well, that's an incredible ROI, right? But like, so once a company figures that out, they scale this stuff as much as they can afford. But what that also told me was there's a lot more room for margin there that, some companies will be willing to pay. And so as I kind of launched, I figured out like, all right, there's room here. And now we charge close to $2,000 a blog post. And that's just because, again, there's a lot of room in that market to play with. Now that may not last forever, right? Like that's one of the challenging things because, and I like this market. This is something in general I've come to like in service markets is like, I like the market that there's no dominant player. There's a lot of small players because it means there's room for you to carve a little toehold and you don't have to go in and be the winner take all. Like, it's not the Uber versus Lyft thing where you've got these huge behemoths that are going to own the whole market. Now you can come in as like just one of a lot of under $5 million companies. And that's exactly why the podcast consultant, the business I just bought, appealed to me too.
Well, Karl, now that you've whet your appetite with buying businesses, you are going to love fragmented markets for a completely different reason, which everyone knows where I'm going with that. That's really cool. Okay, and before we get to your story of buying a podcast consultant, let's go ahead and define productized service, which I teased at the beginning, because I think it's so relevant. It's relevant to the business you bought and the current business.
Yeah.
So you touched on it when you were like the way you designed this business was such that you're not selling hours. You're
Right.
selling flat fee, like
Yep.
an article for X, 2 articles for Y, 10 articles for Z. I assume.
Yep, that's
so
right.
there's kind of like you're picking. The client is like picking things off a menu. Very well defined, no
Yep.
scope creep. No, you know how long, so you can really, like you said, make it very systematized. Is that right so far?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like basically the quick and easy way to say this is like it is what it sounds like. It's taking a service offering and packaging it up like it's a product that people could theoretically go to your website and click buy now. It's in their cart and they submit their spec and they get their results back at some time. Now, I'll say that there's degrees of productizing a service. So in other words, there's some that are literally like you can go into the site, you never talk to a human. It's like buying a SaaS product and you've just bought access to this service, right? And then there's ours, which is a lot more done with you and hands-on, and there's a lot of back and forth. Part of it's the nature of our content, part of it's the nature of the clients we work with. They're big companies that want to have real conversations with people on a phone. And whereas, some productized services are very hands-off. But I think the big lesson is like, it's just a fancy word. At the end of the day, almost every service business would benefit from some degree of productization, like standardization. It's why nobody buys like general purpose consulting firms. Like if I had made this Karl's developer marketing consulting firm and it was all just branded to me and it was all about my smart brain, getting to hire me for hours, there's no way this would have been something I could step away from this quickly, right? It wouldn't happen. And it's the reason those companies don't get bought, or if they do, it's like for pennies on the dollar compared to a company that has actually sort of built a repeatable product service offering.
But let me push on that a little bit, because fundamentally a productized service, is it just marketing? Is it just positioning?
I think
Is it
so.
just positioning, or is there something under the hood that actually is different than, Karl's SEO agency?
I mean, it's a word. It's just a way to describe, a service business that is not quite so bespoke. Part of it is like instead of branding the company around like we will go in and give you the best bespoke solution for everything you do. We kind of brand it as like, this is a repeatable turn on the knob, turn off the knob kind of turnkey thing that you can implement. So it appeals to that kind of buyer, the person who wants that. Other people it doesn't appeal to. I mean, we get people all the time asking us to send them custom proposals for whole, marketing packages. And we just don't do that. So we just tell them, here's somebody else that you should do that with. And that's totally fine. You have to be willing to say no to business. Like that's also one of the big things that, again, service businesses and consulting marketing agencies really struggle with, is saying no to the wrong business. When I started draft.dev, people were always like, well, why don't you write content for other kinds of companies too? You guys have obviously figured something out. And I'm like, yeah, but our whole brand, our whole defining features, very specific. We're just going to be very specific. And it makes we immediately win more trust and more business because we only do the one specific thing. Whereas I think it's a lot harder to stand out when you do everything for everybody. Sure.
Well, Karl, at the risk of flattering you, I really feel like you had a lot of you made some wise decisions in when you went into draft.dev, that you didn't make a lot of the beginner mistakes.
But I think that was, to be honest, and this is what people ask me about this a lot, like your first business you actually started actually took off really quickly. How did that happen? I'm like, well, I was the first employee twice. As much as this was my first one, I technically owned 100% of going into day one. I had been right there as companies went from 0 to 30 people and raised $5 million in funding, lots of stuff I got to see. So I think that's one cheat code you can kind of take away from this is if you're interested in entrepreneurship, but you're not quite sure you want to buy something or start something, go be the first 10 employees, one of the first 10 employees. It's a super interesting experience. You get a ton of insight into how things really work and the goods and bads, the ups and downs, the grind and the awesome times. It's a really a good experience.
I said we were last question on draft.dev, but I have one more. If and when you do get, and I guess you will get to a point where you hire in an operator of some kind, will you expect that person to also grow the business? I mean, can you step out of this business that's doing $2.5 million a year of revenue, step out of it, put somebody else in charge, and expect it to continue growing? Also,
that's a good question. I do think yes, but it may not be. I mean, I don't think even if I were running the business full time, I would grow it as quickly like as it did these last couple of years forever, right? That's just unrealistic. It's not that big of a market, to be perfectly honest. So here's the way I look at growth though. Let's pick any industry or service for an industry and say, and I ask myself, in 10 years, will there be more demand for this than there is today? And if so, do we think that's going to outpace the general, market return? Like if I put it in the S&P 500, right? And I think when you ask me the question about developer content, is there going to be more content that helps software developers build more software in 10 years than today? Absolutely. Like, I don't know what format that content will take. Maybe it'll be more video and maybe it'll be a mixed medium. Maybe AI will partially write some of it. But either way, there's going to be more content because humans are going to be writing software and more software in 10 years than they are today. So I just think it's an inevitability that it will grow as long as we stay in the market and have a presence there. The same with the podcasting company. It's like, I think there'll be more B2B podcasts in 10 years than there are today. They might be video, they might be short form on TikTok, but there's going to be more of them. And so I just want to be in that market and experience that growth.
Well, beautiful segue. Okay. So you decide that you kind of have the itch to do something else after draft.dev, as you've grown it nicely, but it can also now kind of operate without you or without your full-time attention. So what next? So you went to the ETA conferences, you read the books, then what next?
So I got really interested in this whole search fund model, and I realized that there's a name for what I'm doing. It's a self-funded search, and I got into the search funder community, which I'm sure lots of people here know, and get in there and start asking questions and answering questions and just kind of seeing what people are doing. What happened, the story was I started to come up with this vision of buying a portfolio of niche companies like this. And then I talked to a friend about it, and he and I have gone way back, but we've never really done a big project together, start a business together, but we've been talking about that for the last year. And I just kind of pitched him on this idea really casually. And he's like, dude, that sounds awesome. I want to do it. Let's make it happen. So this guy's in Austria. He sold a business, a startup a few years back. So he had some money he'd been doing angel investments with and was kind of ready to do to get into something new. So we went in and started the search process. I guess that's a good break point. Do you I can hop into all the details of how we ran the search and why we did it that way, but I'm happy to answer other questions if you got anything else first.
No, that's great. Let's hear about this. But before you jump in, I'll plug your article. You wrote a great kind of postmortem of this whole process, laid it out really nicely. For a lot of my audience, a lot of it's going to already feel familiar if they've read Buy Then Build. Certainly, totally, it's really the anatomy of a search, but it was still, it's nicely condensed in a single article, and so anyway, let's kind of bang through the chronology, and I'll stop you at points. So what happened next?
So, and I wrote that because I got so many people asking to book a meeting with me after I did this. They knew I bought this company. I was like, I'm sick of taking these 30-minute meetings where I tell them the same thing every time. I was like, here, read this article and then tell me if you have specific questions. Then we can do a meeting. Let's get beyond the basics. So, but I'm happy to walk through that. Initially we were we sort of started looking at all service businesses that were productized or could be productized, right? And so we just had this, we went to brokers, we went to all the little marketplaces for small businesses. We knew we wanted something under a couple million in total price because we were going to be putting our own down payment on it. So we didn't want to bring in investors for this one just because I like the idea of holding control and holding equity. Again, I'm thinking of this long term, not I want to get a return in 5 years. This is about building up a legacy forever. So
Karl, let me jump in. I'm gonna be interrupting you all the while. So $2 million. Let's call it $2 million is your ceiling. So as I No, because I know your story. You do an SBA loan, so you guys are basically kind of bringing, call it $200,000 to $400,000 of your own money to the table, sort of thing. Okay,
yeah, that's what we were assuming. And then we would do the SBA loan and a seller's note to kind of make up for any difference, or to have some sort of tie into the seller for longer to make sure they're kind of incentivized for the business to keep going.
Right. One more question.
Yeah.
Give us examples. So we've talked about productized services in the abstract. Give us examples of other.
Yeah, that's a good
examples.
Good question.
Yeah.
So we looked at things like other article writing services that did like maybe more general purpose business or consumer content. We looked at unlimited design services are really popular right now. That's where you pay like a fixed monthly fee, like $500 a month, and you can submit as many requests for a little custom design or avatar, whatever you want online. And a lot of businesses use this to help like augment their blog posts, right? So it's like every week I can go submit a new request to get a new blog post cover image or social media images or whatever. Those are really popular, and they're easy to start. I have thoughts about the downsides to them, but like anyway, we looked at some of those.
I do too. I use one of those for acquiring wines. But go ahead.
That's an aside, but there are some interesting things like that. And then we looked at just random things that would come up. Like one guy did it was like product hunt launches for people, where he takes your product and helps you get it launched on Product Hunt. Again, that's got some problems with that kind of business model, because a lot of what he was doing was kind of gaming the system, is like very short term, not going to work forever. But interesting business anyway. He made good money doing it, great margins, super easy to run. So anyway, looked at all those, and then we were like, okay, this is too much. Like, there's honestly just so many options there that it was hard to compare. There was like every business was apples and oranges, because like an unlimited design business with a subscription fee is way different than these one-off product hunt businesses where you just get single, customers at a time. So I was like, let's just make a rubric and start to figure out like what industry we want to focus in on. So we both really like audio and video both as a medium, because we already are both familiar with written content, especially working with draft.dev. And I was like, so many of our clients ask for audio or visual versions of this content. Like maybe there's a chance to like cross sell there, or we can figure out ways to like make these businesses interact down the line. But in the short term, we just both looked at podcasting and said, there will be more businesses doing B2B podcasting in 10 years than there are today. I'm very confident in that. Now, will it be, 100 times more? Probably not. But will it be 2 to 3 times more? Probably. I could see that. Because it is a really good way to build up trust with your audience. And this is very meta, right? Well, like we're doing it right here on the show. But it's a good way to like get in front of that audience. It doesn't cost nearly as much time for the host or the guest as writing an article would. And it's a more personal message, to be honest. Again, as AI starts to write more content, people wonder, is this just a robot writing this piece, or is this actually what the CEO thinks? Whereas, you could probably fake my voice through AI too, but like, I think it's a lot harder, and it's a lot more personal when you can kind of hear the person talking. So anyway, we liked the industry, and we were like, let's just focus there. So we built up a list. We went through LinkedIn and found like 100 or 120, I don't remember, like maybe more even, podcast production and editing agencies that were in the US that had the potential to be as big as we wanted, like big enough and not too big, and just started like reaching out to them cold. So we used LinkedIn Sales Nav almost exclusively. I sent a few emails. Those never went through, and LinkedIn Sales Nav worked like a fairly high bit at the time. I think we were probably getting like 5 to 10% response rates. Now, not all those were positive. A lot of them were, not right now. But it was definitely getting through to people's inboxes. And my assumption there is this particular target demographic of they're relatively young business owners, maybe in their 40s, not in their 70s. So they're on LinkedIn. They're a digital business, so they get clients through LinkedIn as well. So they have to have a presence there. So they're in there checking it. And so I think it makes sense for that audience. I don't think this is something you'd replicate if you're going to buy a plumbing business. As we've pointed out here, it's apples and oranges type businesses. But
it's Karl. It's a good point for the audience to. This is one of the benefits of productized services, because they're generally digitally delivered businesses, and so the owners of these businesses and potential sellers of these businesses are going to be much easier to reach via online channels versus the 75-year-old owner of a plumbing company, for sure. And that finding deal flow is important, and it's enough for somebody to like want to take a look at an industry. I mean, just the access to deals. And so this represents, productized services represent, kind of better, easier to drum up deal flow than plumbing businesses.
Than some, And you're not geographically constrained. I mean, other than being in the US because we wanted the SBA loan, there was no real, like they could be in Oklahoma, they could be in California. And we don't have to, we've never shook the hands of the guy like in person that we bought the business from yet. I may go out there this August though. So I'm going to try to actually meet in person, but like, it's funny to like have transferred the biggest purchase I've ever made in my life. And I've never met the guy in person.
Yeah. I should have asked this earlier, Karl, but what about e-commerce or SaaS? Why did you not consider all those other digital types of businesses? Actually, I make the error of often talking about like the basket of potential digital businesses is e-com, SaaS, like affiliate content and lead gen, kind of a distant fourth. But really productized services, they're not explicitly digital, but everything can be done online. So they're kind of quasi, but they should really be in that bucket. But anyway, why did you not consider these other four possibilities, especially that you're actually a technical person? You're not even just comfortable online.
Right. Yeah. We talked about this and first of all, e-commerce, neither one of us had any experience with. I mean, it's cool, but like to go into, I think a lot of searchers face this challenge when they are looking or buy a business. When you don't have any industry experience, it can be really hard to actually see like what is going on in those businesses. So I felt like there was just too many landmines that we would hit if we bought something that was a little too far afield. So e-com was out. We did talk about SaaS because my partner had built and sold a SaaS, like he knew what that was. And I had been with SaaS companies, so like I knew what that would look like. The downside to SaaS is because the multiples are so high relative to a service business, we would have to buy something where we would be very in the weeds. Like I would probably have to be writing code or at least overseeing engineers who wrote code. Unless we did a big fundraise and bought a $10 million company, in which case they might have a whole team. But I don't know what SaaS multiples are now, but at the time they were. I mean, we were seeing stuff that was 8 to 10 times EBITDA or SDE, which is just like, I mean, it just puts a lot of things out of reach. Totally. So that was our thought on SaaS. And
then
honestly,
what about content businesses? Since that's really your
content,
wheelhouse,
right? It definitely would have been. Wouldn't have been a bad idea. I mean, we talked about buying like a developer content type site and trying to maybe just amp it up. I think content is interesting. It's going to get harder and harder to monetize content as more and more gets created. This is kind of one of the downsides to content getting easier to create is that monetization is super hard. I think a lot of the best content monetization is just pushing a specific SaaS or product that you sell. And so you end up building a content business that really has to support an e-commerce business as well, or a SaaS business as well, in order to get the most margin. Now, I'm not saying you can't. Obviously, there's plenty of people with good content businesses. It's just it's a different model.
Yeah. And maybe is another way of saying what you just said. So make sure I understand that essentially content marketing that what you describe as content marketing, like, so the kind of, the 10-year-old version of content marketing when it was first coming into inception from HubSpot and the rest, where the best marketing is going to be content. And so companies that could afford it would have developed entire content, like HubSpot, entire content operations, not to monetize the content directly, but indirectly as a form of pushing people ultimately to their brand. It's a very kind of top of funnel way of bringing people in.
Yeah,
is that still as relevant and does it work as well? You have to say yes, because that's what draft.dev is.
I mean, I think that because podcasting is a form of content marketing as well.
Exactly.
I believe very strongly that content and that personal relationship you get with an audience through content is the way that B2B like sales will go. I mean, not to say no industry will ever benefit from cold outreach. There's absolutely good cases for it. And I think that's an interesting model too. But the truth is you need content to support cold outreach as well. So like it never becomes less important. I mean, I think too, part of it, Will, as we were talking through it, we were like, okay, if we buy a bunch of businesses that are like all just totally different, then we have to figure out different operational models for each of them. And I'm not saying that's impossible or just something I'd never want to do, but like, why not for the first one, make it as easy on ourselves as possible? Buy something with a pretty similar operational model so that we understand how to look at it versus the other company. And so that maybe we can start to share some of the back office resources. Because as we've sort of modeled this out, we're like, well, we know what, gross margins and net margins are for these businesses. And that net margin part, you lose a lot on like part-time accounting, part-time HR, part-time marketing, part-time. There's a bunch of part-time roles that all these small businesses need that don't need to be like in that small business necessarily. So I think what we'll end up doing is sort of building those into their own back office organizational unit that kind of serves all the companies and helps improve those margins across the board. That's the theory, at least. Talk to me in 5 years. Tell me if we got. I'll tell you if we got there.
Well, that debate between a centralized services model and a decentralized services model is a debate that is ongoing, and holdcos are kind of battling internally with themselves as to what makes sense all the time.
Right.
Okay. So we're getting the sense here that like this first acquisition, you're wanting to like learn how to buy a business, what it's like, what it feels like, presumably with the idea that this maybe becomes the model and you do this again with bigger and bigger. So kind of building a holdco of sorts. Was that an explicit mission?
Yeah. Well, once we started looking at buying a business, we were like, I mean, it became the explicit mission pretty quickly. Like we both we're both young enough and concerned with like long term, we want to build something meaningful. So to buy a small business that's, like under 2 million in revenue and then just say, well, we just want to hold that and run it forever is just not exciting enough. Like, to be honest, I think there's still plenty of time for me to like figure things out and go a little bigger. So it was definitely the explicit thing. And the other thing is that, there is more talk about these like mini holding companies or mini private equity funds where you raise some money and you buy a bunch of companies and you kind of either roll them together and sell them or just roll them together and keep the cash flow. So it's kind of becoming more popular. I don't want to I'm not a trend chaser per se, but I like seeing other people do it makes me think, oh, well, that's something you can do. It's like, it just helps to know there's guys like an Andrew Wilkinson who's buying a bunch of small companies and like doing this kind of thing and be like, okay, I can listen to him for some advice and some like forethought, but I can do things my own way as well. Yep.
Well, I think you just articulated why Acquiring Minds, this podcast exists. So
that's right.
So we're on the same page there.
I always loved listening to this show and just the variety of businesses and guests and the types of things they buy. It's just so interesting to hear just because I think a lot of people step into entrepreneurship and they want a template. I think this to me was one of the hardest things about the first 6 months of the business was there's no answers. There's no right way to do this. I can look at my competitors. I can try to deconstruct what they do, but like none of that matters. You have to go make your own path. And that's super like fun, but also really challenging.
One thing I've noticed, Karl, in my own, with Acquiring Minds itself is that my own interest and kind of where I was at home was digital businesses. And so I covered more acquiring digital business stories in the early days. And I've just, over time, it's become less and less for whatever reason, probably just because my own eyes were opened to the whole world of offline, sweaty, traditional businesses. And so they're so rich and varied and interesting. But all of that is just to ask you, when you're kind of like me, you and I have kind of similar backgrounds, at least kind of ecosystems that we come from. When you went to the ETA conference at Booth and Kellogg, you were probably similarly exposed to people who were buying more traditional businesses, not digital. Did you feel like a fish out of water? And And how do you how do you think about that?
For a lot of reasons. Like for a lot of reasons, because I'm a pretty like dressed down casual guy, and these are a little more formal MBA types and finance types. You get a lot of suits in there, and I'm like a t-shirt and jeans everyday person. I'm not gonna be something different for them. But it was fine. Everybody was great. I met a lot of great people, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. Like I couldn't go to that, like I was looked down on or anything at all. Because like the truth is, honestly, a lot of them were super interested in the fact that I was doing something different from the typical model, and the fact that I actually already ran a business and was looking to buy something else too, and like started to like put that out there. And people are like, that's really just a lot of the people in the ETA world have never actually run a business, right? That's the typical background is more either finance or like maybe they've done operations, but they've never actually been a CEO. So, that's one thing that's kind of fun about being in that, like being a little different in the crowd is you get a lot of conversations going because people want to hear the different story. We want to hear the same story over and over again. It was definitely eye-opening though, because there's a lot of things that are fundamentally different about digital businesses, I think. One is like they can, and maybe this isn't always true, but they can be very small and still be a little more hands off if you do them right. because I think there's less of that need for like a CEO who's in the office every day, like, showing a face. The in-person businesses too, like, I mean, location, like having a physical location I would need to go to every day is kind of a non-starter. It just wasn't interesting to me. I mean, it was not a thing. I haven't had to like go to an office in a long time, and I didn't want to start. Just, I've got 2 young kids too, so I was like really appealed to staying remote. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things practically that I wasn't interested in there. Plus, I think that personally, I want to do things where I get the best leverage on my time and skills that's possible. So buying digital businesses that I kind of know how to run fundamentally, I know the things that they're going to run into as far as cash flow, invoicing, receivables. I know how the finances work. I know roughly what the gross and net margins should kind of look like because I've got a ton of like insight into that. Plus, I kind of know how to do the sales on these sorts of companies. I mean, I led sales at draft.dev for the first year and like figured out a model that kind of works. And same with this company. I came in and just kind of picked it up really quickly because it's the same thing. It's just selling a different service to a slightly different audience, but they're not that different fundamentally. So many things there that just transferred that I was like, I don't want to give that up and start all the way back to like, I buy let's say auto repair shop or something. And now I have no idea how to grow an auto repair shop. I mean, maybe I just try to like survive, but that would be the best case would be survival. Whereas I feel like coming into a digital business that has been run well, but could be run a little better, I think we'll come in and grow the first year. I mean, it's looking that way so far, but like, time will tell, right? There's probably going to be I'm sure there'll be rockiness because that's just what small business ownership is. But I feel like you get a lot quicker, like uptime, like time to actual effectiveness. That book First 90 Days has some word they use for this. And I've just read that as I was getting into buying a new company too. And they use a phrase that describes like how quickly can you get to effectiveness or doing something effective that shows your team I'm actually useful. So like for me, it's coming as a new CEO. How quickly could I get the new payroll system implemented and rolled out so that everybody's getting paid? Because that looks really good. Like Karl could actually do something here. And that's the kind of thing like that really, if you can make that metric faster by buying a business, you already have skills in that area or knowledge in that area. I think it goes a long way to just building credibility and the team seeing like, oh, this is why Karl's in here buying this business. And it's not like Karl's just like that moron who doesn't know a thing about podcasting.
Yeah. No, I mean, as you articulate all of this, Karl, it's very compelling and convincing. Now, a lot of my audience is considering buying businesses in industries they don't know at all, and that's not I don't think, and I would hope that that's not a challenge that they're underestimating. They recognize, and in fact, a theme of the podcast often is like, what do you say? How do you build credibility quickly?
Yep.
And you do need to be confident yourself that you are actually going to be delivering value, and oftentimes the answer is simply that the seller might have been kind of a technician themselves and grown crews around them, and they find themselves in the seat after growing their business for a number of years, and they don't have the business savvy or the appetite or whatever, or the systematic thinking. And so a person who comes from a background where they really think about business in kind of an abstract way can deliver value at that layer, at that level. But of course, you need to communicate that to your employees who are going to see you as like what's the word from whatever, an outsider, an interloper. For sure. So it's really interesting. But to your point, certainly if you have a resume that like speaks to the actual service being provided by the business that you're acquiring, that just like neutralizes this whole point of friction. So that's easier if you could do that. So that's great.
Definitely.
So you guys have this thesis, this kind of industry thesis you develop around B2B podcasting. You're reaching out on LinkedIn. It's actually really quite successful. These people are easy to find. They're pretty responsive. Plop us back into your search.
Yeah. A lot of them were just what you described, Will. They were operators who'd started the businesses almost as freelance audio engineers and then kind of accidentally grew to a point where they sort of hit the limits of what they could handle, where growth meant more hours in the business and they didn't want that. So you kind of like hit some point wherever that is for them. And they're like, I don't want to grow because it's just going to hurt more. So we were looking for those kind of people, that profile of somebody who liked the operator, liked to be in there editing the audio, but shouldn't be anymore. And so we started having calls. I probably had, I don't know, between 20 and 50 calls last summer when I was doing this. Just a ton of interest, and some were way off base. I tried all sorts of things. Like I think one thing I learned was being very direct in my messaging instead of trying to beat around the bush and be like, I just want to have a chat and hear about your business. Nothing, I don't do anything like that like anymore. What worked was just being very direct and upfront and saying, I own a small business right now. I want to buy another company, like a podcast production agency. Looks like you guys have built a good thing. You want to talk. And that is like that simple sort of messaging that really appealed, I think, to other business owners, because they were like, oh, this Karl guy's not that different from me. He's a small business owner too. And like so I using the credibility to get whatever you can leveraged out of that. So we start to have conversations. We get down to probably 3 to 5 who are interesting and interested in us. And then we sort of just tried to figure out how do we start to whittle that down even further. And eventually after, a month or so of conversations with all them, we got down to one who signed an actual LOI, and that's the company we bought. So we signed the LOI probably 3 to 5 months into our searching process. It was pretty quick, like, to be honest. And I assumed that something would happen to kill the deal. It's like, because I just hear the numbers and I'm like, this is just we're not going to get our first LOI. Let's just don't get married to it. Just, let's just try. So we start to do diligence. Pretty simple on a deal this small. So, it's under $1 million in total value. So right under $1 million. So like that, it's not that complicated to look at the books of a company like this. That was another thing too. I'm not a finance background person. So like, not that I'm lost in books. I know how to look at my books at draft.dev very well. And I know what things mean. And I know how to all that. So when I looked at this company, it wasn't that different. And I was like, great. So I kind of know what this looks like. Like, it wasn't like I was out of water there. We weren't dealing, like, the nice thing too about digital businesses when you're not a super savvy finance person is they don't deal with a lot of the complicated stuff, like, having equipment that you have to,
CapEx.
CapEx right. So all the different stuff that like goes into the complicated accounting of like valuating that stuff and then drawing it down over time and amortizing like expenses and in income. This guy's a cash basis business, cash in, or his people invoice him for the work they do every month, and he invoices clients every month. It's very simple to look at those books and be like, here's money in, money out. No other costs other than people, basically. It's just a little bit of software. So it's super lean. So anyway, diligence was not complicated. We just verified that all the things he sent us was correct by looking at contracts, looking at actual work done, and talking to customers, things like that. So got a good feel there. And then unfortunately, when we made the mistake of kind of engaging the bank as we were closing up our diligence, we felt good and we were like, okay, let's talk to the bank now. And I should have started that earlier. Again, hindsight, now I know this, like, the bank just takes a long time. And I think part of it, we got kind of caught through the holidays too. So we started to engage the bank around November, I think. And then the holidays hit and everybody was out on their side for half the month. And so nothing got done until January, really. We finally started to make some movement in January, but then I think honestly, a couple things were happening. There was the banking sort of wobbles that were happening. Interest rates kept going up, and then what was the bank that closed? Silicon Valley Bank, right?
Yeah. SVB.
So SVB closing kind of happened towards was that February or March maybe?
Sounds right.
Either way, that got like the bank a little nervous too, and I think their credit team put a little extra on us for that. So it was way longer. It took 6 months with the bank after our like month or so of like quick diligence, So they asked for a lot of things that I would say were somewhat unnecessary given the size and scope of the deal. But they got to do. They're all covering their downside. I get it. Sure, I understand. Sure. So,
and was your seller amenable to all of this stuff? Because it can be kind of onerous on the demands of the bank can be onerous on the seller.
I felt bad for how long it drug on, because he wanted it to be closed up by the end of 2022 as well. Like, of course, that would have been great, but just realistically, that wasn't going to happen. He was great though. He was super communicative and like stayed with us. We kept meeting with him every week or two just to kind of keep the communication going, be very transparent about where we were at. I've always favored just transparency. Like, we told him up front, this is our first time buying a company and dealing with this kind of loan. We're not going to do it right. I'm sure, like, we're going to have to go back and we're going to screw things up. But that humility kind of like, again, I think this is something that I think benefits a searcher, but I don't know if, maybe this isn't everybody's style, but just being real and being like humble to these other business owners, like, why not? They're small business owners. They've screwed things up too. They know it's hard. And to just go in and say like, oh yeah, I'm going to come in, buy your business. I know exactly what I'm doing. It's like, that's just, don't say that. Like that's, be honest about what you do know and don't. Yeah. So he was great through the process. The bank, eventually we got things going and done with them and wrapped up, and all was good there.
Let's just circle back a little bit to your search. Why some of the others that you got on the phone and looked at their businesses, why did you decide, why was this guy the winner, the podcast consultant? Why was he the winner?
Some were too small, like under 500K in revenue. And it's just really hard to justify the work that goes into the sale for that. I would have been great to get something maybe around $1 million, $1.5 million, but $750K, which this is what this one came in for, was not bad. I mean, that was within a ballpark. I think because this is, again, based on my draft.dev experience, business like this doesn't usually have the margin to hire a salesperson until they get towards like $1 million, $1.5 million in revenue. There's probably exceptions, but like just generally speaking, when you want to really like a good salesperson, you're going to need to pay six figures. And the only way to do that is get to a certain size. So that was kind of one of my thoughts, was like, how quickly could we get it to that point, right? I don't have to be running sales calls, because I love doing the sales calls. It's a great learning experience, but like, obviously it's a huge time investment. Yep. And so, yeah, we'll get there. But so that was a lot of it was size. Some of it was like sellers just kind of realizing, we were very upfront about our numbers too. We were like, we're going to take your SDE. We'll figure out what it is with you, kind of go through your books, and we tell them what SDE means, because a lot of them didn't even know what that meant really, which, that's fair. And then we'll give you about a 3x multiple. That was it. We didn't say like, we might give you 4, we might give you 2. Like, we were just like, it's going to be around 3. And there's kind of no way we're going to pay more than that. Just the economics don't make sense, and your size business doesn't. And we might pay a little less if you have reasons we need a discount. So, and once people look at those numbers, that's really where the business owner's like, ooh, interesting. So, say it's $1 million business with 30% margins. They've been getting $300K a year for, this small business they run, which is pretty good money for anybody. But for a small business owner, who does their own thing, it's great. And then they're going to get, $900K, and then you take out taxes and you think about like, you're going to get, 65 to 70% of that maybe, or whatever, whatever it is per you. It ends up getting less appealing as people look at that, and they're like, oh, I'm not going to get $1 million for this business, you know? And so I think there's something there where like mentally, once they do the math, they're kind of like, oh yeah, maybe this isn't right to sell yet. Like, I like the $300K a year, which is totally fair.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great, Karl. And just going back to the high response rates you were getting, I know I'm going back a few steps here, but the other thing to call out about that is, which you kind of already have a business. And so many of my guests, after they buy their first deal, they find proprietary outreach, like subsequent proprietary outreach, to go and buy an add-on. So much easier, and often deal flow comes to them. I mean, you have so much credibility if you are already a business owner. You're talking business owner to business owner. So we have to acknowledge that those high response rates you were getting on LinkedIn, part of that was almost certainly they like looked at your LinkedIn profile and they're like, oh, this guy already has a business. And oh, by the way, the business is really complementary. So it feels really natural that a guy doing written content would now want to be diversifying or adding on podcast content. So there was a whole narrative they were building around you before they decided to even respond. So that helped.
But I think that's like a key thing of any good cold outreach, is that it has a narrative that makes sense to people. The same is true if you're going to do cold outreach for a business to grow it. Like, if you're just, the spray and pray stuff doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's too done, and you get immediately like clipped by spam filters. You got to figure out a way to draw a line between what you're offering and what the person's doing, and it making sense to them. So I think, whether you have I had the advantage of being a business owner, but you could have industry experience. That would be a great advantage to be like, yeah, I worked at this really big competitor of yours, and I want to buy a business like this because I love this kind of industry or whatever, like that kind of thing is huge too. So whatever you've got, use that personal connection, even going to the same college with somebody, or like you grew up in the same small town, like there's got to be something there that you can build a connection with. And I would just say, I mean, that's the way I would always lean into any kind of cold outreach to people.
Yeah. Yeah. One tactic that you use to try to get these folks on the phone in the early part of your efforts was sales calls, was kind of faux sales calls. And I'm sharing this because it's in your article.
In there,
But tell people how that went, and then
it didn't work. No. So what I was thinking is, this small businesses, like most of the time, the founder's going to be the one doing the sales, because like I said, they have to get a certain size for a salesperson to make sense. So I figured I'll just book a sales call. That's a free way to get on their calendar, right? And then try to like twist it into something else. It was super freaking awkward and just not like, it was not genuine. You know, this comes back to like, I was learning my style and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be straight up with these people. Like I would rather someone be straight up with me. So I'm going to treat them the same way. So as simple as it is to get on the phone with people by booking sales calls, it's probably a very low conversion. And I also realize it takes a lot of time. And this is kind of, again, where like, I'm always tracking my time and optimizing, like, what do I actually need to be doing versus what is kind of like fluff. And I realized a lot of these calls were just fluff. Now I will say we went through after we had an LOI and we started booking calls, like sales calls with competitors before we officially own the business as a way to understand how they work and some of their, like get some insight into their pricing, their process, their sales process, et cetera. That was super helpful. And I would, before you've got on your LinkedIn profile that I own this competing business, like go book sales calls with the people that are like, in that are competitors. Cause it's a great insight into how the industry works.
Yeah, totally. Shop them, shop the competition.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and these were not companies that we were going to buy. So it was just a matter of like, we want to know how they operate, especially the ones that are bigger. Like, if you think about it, we're going to buy one at $1 million in like total value, but what are the ones who are at 5 or 10 million? What do they do? What do they look like? How do they act? Because that's where we want to go. And it's like, we don't, like I said, with draft.dev, we don't want to copy verbatim what a competitor does because that's just it's probably not going to work. But we want to think about the best practices they've learned and how we can apply that to our own style.
Sure. And going back to your industry thesis, or if you quote unquote, wanting a podcast production agency, there are players in this space that you saw that have gotten to 5 and 10 million. So there is a path to those kind of numbers.
Yeah, very few, but there are. I think, it's so hard to say again, like, because this industry is growing, and also a lot of them, they do a mixture of things. So yes, podcast production, editing, but also maybe they do podcast launch services or auditing, which we do as well. Or maybe they do video stuff, which ends up getting more complicated, and video production can get really expensive. So part of it too can be like their numbers can be really high because maybe they're the video service provider for Adobe or some huge company that pays them $1 million a year to like run their whole video operation. So like, looking at the raw numbers is less important, like as far as like how huge could you get, and more about like in this little piece of the market we have, do we have a good foothold and can it get bigger? And that's really what we care about. So yeah, I do think there's a pathway for this business to get to well over 5 million in revenue in the next few years. How quickly that happens will kind of depend on how well we operate, I guess.
Well, and also going back to your point about fragmentation and how there's so many small players out there. Maybe you get to, 5 million by acquiring 10, $500,000, one man shows, one woman shows.
Your head is right where mine is, Will. Yep.
One other thing to call out, a huge thing to call out especially for anybody listening who works in offline sweaty businesses, the nature of these productized services is their working capital, the cash conversion cycle is positive. So you take the money first and then you pay it out to deliver the service after the fact. And, coming from the digital world, this is always what I like. Was my normal. But I, now that I've been exposed to all of these, the traditional businesses, it is not that way. And so cash flow management is this theme that comes up again and again, and even very smart people really struggle with it. It's a skill you have to learn, and often people will really get squeezed, in their first 6 months at this. So these businesses generally, of course, it varies, but as a general rule, you take a credit card payment, or maybe it's an invoice if it's a big enough spend, but you probably demand payment up front and then you deliver the service, which. Yeah, so that's a fantastic characteristic that I had, historically underestimated.
Yeah, absolutely, and it does. I'll put the asterisks there because again, like having run a couple of these now, there are exceptions to that, especially as you move up market. So draft.dev, for example, we now work with a lot of publicly traded companies, and we normally would take full, like at least half, but usually full price upfront, and then we deliver the service over the next 3 or 4 months. Now, with a really big company, you may not have the weight to do that. If their payables department says, nope, that's not the way we do things, you may just have to deal with it. So think about, like, know what that is if you're buying a digital service business, because some agencies are more back-weighted, where they charge for work after it's done because of the nature of the companies they're with, or like just the way they do. But either way, if they have a frequent billing setup, that's definitely better than like long term, right? Because again, cash flow, like this guy was invoicing weekly and some like weekly and monthly, depending on the client, which is great. It means we're getting fast cash in, and most people are paying within 20 days. So it's like really fast. Like so to your point, yes, great for cash flow. We did get a little extra on our loan just to make sure that we had some cash in the bank on day one, because we bought the receivables, but we let him keep the cash. So, we want some cash in there. But either way, like it's been great because we've immediately like got positive cash flow going, and like it's kind of stayed consistent.
Great. But to be clear, I was wrong to suggest that he was taking payment up front. He is actually invoicing.
Yeah, he actually bills. Afterwards, and that's one of the areas I think we could improve. Again, this is like we bought a business knowing that there's some things, easy levers to improve. I experienced this challenge firsthand with draft.dev the first year when we were growing really quickly, and second too. The very first part of the year we had a negative cash cycle. We billed clients afterwards. And we were growing, like doubling every 3 months, and yet we were running out of money and had no line of credit because it was a brand new business. Like I had no idea what I was doing either. So had nothing to draw on. We get down to like, we've added 10 clients last month, but yet we have got $5,000 in the bank and can't, not going to make payroll unless we do something quick. So that was a good lesson to like move everything to upfront billing. And that's, again, that helps a ton when you're growing quickly, because like growth sucks cash is like the phrase that people will tell you. It's totally true. So yeah, if you see a business and you buy it and it's got this negative cash cycle, if there's any way you can turn any of it positive, it's going to be a huge win from especially as you start to really move the growth levers up.
Excellent. That's great, Karl. Okay. So back to the story and the structure of the deal. What did it finally look like?
Yeah, so we did the kind of what they describe in Buy Then Build, where it's 10% cash, 75% SBA loan, and then a 15% seller's note over 5 years at a fixed interest rate that we set early in the process. So we actually got a really, in hindsight, good deal on that because interest rates have kept going up. Whereas the SBA loan obviously is going to be dependent on, I think it's Wall Street Journal plus whatever their markup is, right? So it's a little higher.
Great. Okay. And it was basically a 3x-ish multiple that you paid?
Yeah, a little under 3x. We had a couple discounts for some key people, like one key person who was kind of transitioning out, and we knew it, and the seller was very upfront about it. So we were kind of like, okay, well, that's something we're going to have to deal with and step in to figure out on the first few days. And then the other big concern we had was the client attachment to the seller. And this is obviously like a big one for any really small business like this, is like, clients are they're still on sales calls and on regular support calls with the actual founder, right? And they develop a personal relationship. Like every client we talked to for doing background research, we called several of his clients just to hear what their experience was. And all of them had this very they talked very positively about Matthew, the seller, and the business a little less so. Not that they didn't like the business, they thought of him as the figurehead. Yeah. So we knew that was going to be a risk. So we did a little discounting for that because we thought, it's going to have to be something we overcome. But the seller's, hanging out with us for 6 months to do the, to kind of hand everything off. And so he's got a contract with us, and he's been super great. And honestly, the clients have been very receptive too. They had very low client concentration, about 80 customers that were active. And so the good thing there is, even if we lose a couple because they really liked the seller and they don't like us, we're not going to lose, like 4 clients wouldn't kill us. It's not the end of the world. I think that's really important too for me, at least with any service business I'm going to take over. I want to see a very low concentration and a high volume of clients, even if each one is very small.
Yeah, for sure. And part of the reason that he was kind of the face of the business, at least from the perspective, maybe not the brand, but Actually, I think of the brand as well, but certainly in the sales relationships and the client relationships was because of the way he started, which was he was an audio engineer. Tell the 30-second history of the business.
Yeah. So he was an audio editor engineer at the Wall Street Journal, so had a great network in that finance space, and then kind of went off and started doing this basically freelance, and then eventually hiring editors. He actually had, we inherited now 24 audio editors behind the scenes. So it's not like a tiny operation. He just made it look like it was by kind of being that point person. The other good thing about his background was that it attracted a lot of financial service providers who want shows. So we work with a lot of VC, PE, and financial advisors, insurance companies, and podcasting is a really great medium for them because it's a long sales cycle and it's very trust-based, right? So nobody goes and switches to a new financial advisor because they got a cold email, at least nobody with any money that's smart. So you really need to be in their ears constantly, or at least every week or month or whatever, to remind them how smart you are for months or years before they actually convert. And so for those kind of companies, it's a super great medium because you're really building that trust and you can do that consistently. So anyway, he had good concentration within this industry, which I liked, but low concentration on a single client basis, which I also liked.
Yeah, that's great. And what a niche, the money niche.
Yeah.
VCs, VCs, PE, and financial advisors. Financial advisors are definitely not VCs and PE. So
it's the connection is just the shows are talking about financial and business issues, I would say. It's a little broader than I understand they're not the same business, but the way they kind of think about their branding and marketing is actually not dissimilar because, with financial advisors, it's all about, again, long-term relationship with potential clients and current clients. With PE funds or VC fund, it's long-term positive relationship with both the entrepreneurs for companies you want to buy and the limited partners you want to raise money from in the future or have already raised money from. So even though they're different fundamentally as businesses, they do a lot of the same things for marketing and brand building.
Yeah, great. And what was the seller doing day to day? What are you going to have to replace when he leaves? Was he all sales, or was he actually still doing some production work himself, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so sales for sure. He had never done a ton in the way of marketing or outreach. It was just all very organic, word of mouth client referrals, which is great because those have kept pretty steady since he sold it. And then he was pretty active in the seeing the production queue of what's going out and what's working. He wasn't necessarily doing the audio editing much, but when a client would have a question or a hot issue, often went to him. So we've had to kind of refocus that and shift that over to other team members, which we've already done. So he's out of most of those hot issues. Every now and then he'll step in when it makes sense, but very rarely. And then we do a couple kind of entry point services. So a launch package where we get you from zero to your first episodes out live. And that's a whole process. I've taken over that with another audio engineer. And so the seller's stepping out of that this month. And then audits, which are very similar. It's look at your existing show, tell you what you could do better. And then you get we can also do your ongoing editing if you want. And that's another one where I just am taking over those with another of our audio engineers on the team. So he had pretty good processes in place. He just was doing them himself. I think partly because he likes those things, right? That's, he likes to analyze podcasts. That's part of what he does. So we may remove also there's some services he would do one-off consulting for people where he just book an hour of his time for X dollars and, do it right from the website. We've removed that because that just doesn't make as much sense with the model we're moving towards. And financially, that was not a big part of the business. So we sort of knew that was going to go. But yeah, otherwise we've pretty much tried to keep things the same as they were because he did a good job building up a team and having some good processes in place.
And you said the business was doing $700,000 to $800,000 in revenue. Was that right?
Yeah. I think that is right. I was just pulling up my numbers. The way it kind of shook out, the SDE was around $250K. And then the total sales price was right around $700K after, kind of where we landed. So you can kind of divide up the percentages and figure out how much that was cash versus, seller note and SBA loan. Yeah.
Well, so if it's doing 250 SDE And let's say for easy math, half of that's going to go to your loan. So that leaves you with 125 STE, which is basically, you live in Chicago, that's basically a full-time salary or less, but you've got a partner and you want to reinvest in the business. So I assume you guys are not taking any money out of the business for yourselves. You're reinvesting all of that 125 back in because your partner had an exit and you have income from draft.dev,
that's right.
sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So our goal is not to take cash out yet. What we're going to plan on doing is the economic shakeout roughly to what you said. And then what we're going to do is every quarter look at what's like what we have in the bank that's extra and see, do we want to pay down more of the loan? Do we want to invest in some big growth project? Or do we want to pay ourselves some little bonus or some combination of those three things? So I think at first we'll probably be more aggressive on the loan payments just to get more progress chipped away at that. But if we see some opportunities for growth, like hiring a salesperson will be one of the first things I think would be great to do. We're going to wait till we know we can sustain that for a while. But I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities like that.
And when you said you have the 80 customers, and let's marry this now with a productized service. So what is the actual, what are these contracts? What is this revenue? How is it packaged? Do you have recurring contracts with these VC firms or private financial investors that you're doing like their total outsource their podcast every month, or is one-offs, or give us a picture?
Yeah, good question. So there's no long-term commitment or lock-in with it, which is a little risky. I mean, I could totally see why that would turn some buyers off of a company like this. The contracts basically just say, we will do, whenever you submit work to us, we will invoice you this much for this kind of work. It's a very come as you will sort of thing. That may change over time. Obviously I think there's room for improvement there, but at the same time, it's worked. And what I liked about, even though that's a slight risk, what I liked about the company as a whole is it's been steadily either growing or flat consistently for 5 years. It's not like, he's got these fly-by-night clients that are coming in for one then done. The history shows us that these clients stick around for 5 years. So there's no reason to think that because we come in as new owners, that's going to dramatically change, right? I don't believe that there's any reason that we would think that. So I know that everybody wants you to have, subscription revenue or recurring revenue and all that. And it's totally true. That would make this way more appealing. But at the same time, when you look at service providers get a lot of momentum with the clients. And what I mean is the client knows how to work with us. They know our processes. They've built processes internally around our processes. So switching us out is not like just drop in anybody else, because they don't know if the quality is going to be consistent. They don't know if it's going to be somebody they can trust. There's so many variables that go into that. So honestly, I think that, this was something I'd seen in the other business too. It's just once you get in with good with companies, they keep you around unless something dramatically changes in their environment, or they stop doing the show or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think it's important when considering recurring revenue, which everyone wants for obvious reasons, versus one-off revenue, is if you have a business that you're analyzing that's quote unquote one-off revenue, if you have repeat business, or reoccurring business, not recurring, then the analysis you should do is, what is the lifetime value, the LTV of your customers? Because you may, that's ultimately what it's really about. Because you could have a SaaS business that's recurring, but with high churn. And so if it's a technically recurring business, but all your customers only last for 4 months, then churn out, the LTV, the lifetime value is low. So who cares that it's recurring? But ultimately, the metric, kind of the KPI, is the lifetime value of your customers. And if you can demonstrate that it's relatively high, it matters. It'll get you a lot more comfortable with the fact that it might be, it's reoccurring repeat business as opposed to pure recurring. So. And it sounds like you guys have great LTVs, and it's really sticky, repeat business. Yeah, that's what we felt like. I mean, because companies who see success with a podcast, why would you stop? And honestly, our rates are very reasonable in the market. So why would you go try to find a new provider? It's not something that's worth tackling. Partly too, you think about the opportunity cost, right? If you're if it's a relatively small financial advisory firm, for the founder or even the chief marketing officer to go work through finding a new provider is significant. It's going to be a big project. Yeah. So what are you losing out on marketing wise when you have to do that instead of grow the business? It's just not a priority for people to go swap out unless we start screwing things up, in which case that's a different story. Yeah. Yeah. I got a handful of more questions here, a handful of questions for you. But I know we're bumping up against time, Karl, so I'm gonna go quickly.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the nature of labor in your business. You've got the 24 editors. So one of the things that is a struggle that even people outside of the world of buying businesses have seen headlines about or experienced directly is how tight the labor market is. And certainly in like blue collar businesses and sweaty offline businesses that many of the audience will be considering, it's very acute.
Yep.
So in your business, however, where the entire world is your labor pool, Upwork, the magic of Upwork, my own podcast editor, shout out to Pam, I found on Upwork and love her, she crushes. Do you find that it's like, is there a shortage there, or is it like if you needed to bring in five more people, like you could do that pretty readily?
Yeah, it's especially at the hands-on level of editing, it's relatively easy. I don't want to say very easy. We actually get a lot of inbound interest too, because we've been around and we've got, people know the business, so they apply all the time. So we're always getting new applicants. Plus, a lot of these people are connected to other editors. So the great thing about, working with a company that's all digital, when you think about like the perks, it's not just the money. So like you could be in, all our editors are in Canada, US, and UK, but so that's they're
so it's not even
high.
It's not Philippines style.
No, yeah, we don't at this point. And it's a good thing for them because a lot of them live in like more rural communities in these big countries. So like if you live in middle of nowhere, Nebraska, right? Like, and you're an audio person, a lot of these guys are musicians. They do this on the side for good side income or for their main income, and then the music is the side thing. It's a really appealing job. You can do it anytime you want. You can do it at night, in the morning, middle of the day. It doesn't matter. Nobody's going to check in on you. Super easy, very straightforward rate. We pay competitively for these markets where it's a lower cost of living areas. It's great. So it's all just like, it is geo arbitrage, but not as extreme maybe as you might see like going over to the Philippines. And the advantage there is time zones and cultural sort of norms. At draft.dev, we work with writers, software engineers in 53 countries, I think. So like we're extremely global there. And we have lots of people in other parts of the world, totally different time zones. But the nature of that work is different. Podcast editing, we're a little tighter on our timelines. Like we usually need things like within 48 hours. And so you lose 5 hours or 8 hours on time zones, you start to run into trouble. I could see a world where if we wanted to offer some kind of like overnight delivery, we could have a team in India that did like, or Philippines or something that did the overnight stuff and everything else went through our regular pool. I don't know, but like that's not something we're looking at doing anytime soon.
Great. Well, and just to kind of emphasize the larger point here, that this is often true of digital productized services, where the labor shortage is really, I don't want to overstate it, but it really hasn't been felt at all.
Yeah, it doesn't. No, we don't feel it the same way. There's the very skilled jobs, like management jobs, are tough sometimes. And that's just true of any company. It doesn't matter if you're local or not. Like hiring good managers is always hard, whether you're bringing them outside or promoting. But again, we usually have enough pool of applicants that we can find some good ones in that stack.
So, Karl, sorry, when did you close? When did you close? How long have you been in the business?
End of April, like basically the first week of May, we took over.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's just been a month and a half. Okay. Kind of a two-part question, but related. What you bought would be considered quote unquote small for this audience. And and I think you and I, when we talked offline, you acknowledge as much, like you have felt that it's small now that you're in the seat.
Yeah.
Well, right. Yeah. So kind of talk about that, and then just more broadly, how does it feel? Like how have these first 6 weeks gone? What are the takeaways? How would you distill your experience so far?
Yeah, I think for us, going small was the right move. Again, I think everybody's experience and what you're doing is different. For us, knowing that we were going to self-fund it, and we wanted this to be the first of many. We know that this is just a stepping stone, and it was, I don't want to say I'm not going to be as flippant as to say it's practice, but it was like, let's get experience. Let's get an at-bat with something that is relatively small, and therefore the downside risk is relatively low. Like if this goes out of business, we could still conceivably pay off that loan from our personal income, or like we could figure out a way to get jobs to pay out. Or, like, it wouldn't be the end of our careers. Now that said, stepping in, it is very hands-on work. I mean, I'm on sales calls. I'm managing team members directly. There's not a lot of existing management structure, not a ton of super established things. There's some processes, but it's not like, there's a lot of room for improvement there. So like, you have to be willing, like obviously my partner and I are, to get in there and get in the weeds and, roll up your sleeves. So again, we came into this knowing fairly well that was going to be the case. So it wasn't a surprise, and it's been all good so far. Honestly, I think we've brought in some really quick wins that, like I've mentioned, like the team has seen and we've seen, that have helped us close some deals that may not have closed otherwise, and some improve some things on the back end of like production that may have fallen through the cracks otherwise. So I think we're making good progress already. There's some little things with like invoicing we've already kind of cut down to just doing once a month, so it's more efficient. We don't have to have somebody going through every week to do that. We similarly with payroll, we were running payroll daily up until we took over, and we were like, okay, let's go to once a week. It just doesn't make sense to pay out every single day. So some just little things like that really up our efficiency, I think, is going to help a lot. But we'll see. I mean, this is, like you said, it's very early, so it's going to be like, probably 6 months before we really know how things have gone.
Yeah. Well, then my final question for you, Karl, might need to be answered in 6 months. But after 6 weeks in the business, is your vision of a holdco stronger or weaker in terms of
stronger? But I think the shape of it has changed a bit, or how it might happen. So
okay,
some things I've been thinking about, like, one of the big challenges now is how do we get these companies big enough to where they can have their own little operators, like CEOs or GMs or whatever you want to call that title, because you do have to be a certain size before that role really makes sense. And how do we want to structure that? Do we want to have one CEO who runs multiple of these companies, or do we want to have one who runs each business unit? So we've been thinking a lot through that. And one thing I think a pathway I've started to explore more is, what if we went and bought, let's say, another podcast production agency, we tack it on, we keep the owner, and we give them a little piece to help grow it, almost like a traditional PE fund would do when they buy a company. They keep one of the operators at least to kind of be the head and grow along with it. So that's been entering our thoughts of like, maybe there's a path there that would allow us to avoid more debt, which would be nice, because it's not necessarily easy to go back to the SBA and take a whole nother loan to buy a whole nother business when you are still operating that one and still paying off that loan, right? I think it's technically possible, but I also hear there's a lot of resistance to that. So like, we may be able to skirt away from that and do something a little more creative. But either way, it just means that like there's lots of paths. Again, this is why what's fun about entrepreneurship to me is like, there's no right answer. And either way, we're getting one little step closer to the goal. So I feel very encouraged by it. I think also just seeing a business like this, that's this small, but actually has lots of little things to improve really quickly, and just knowing that that's going to help it grow, it's really exciting. It's like something fun that you feel like you can get your fingers into and make real improvements. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I don't know. There's still a lot of fuzziness once you get more than a year out in my plan, but I feel like the next year is got a pretty good road ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, your point about doing add-on acquisitions, partly with the goal of bringing on the owners of those businesses to be the GM or operator, is something that you see in the offline traditional business acquisition space as well. Effectively, it's effectively an acqui-hire, which we associate with Google and Facebook acquiring like a little startup, but it's kind of effectively the same thing. Buying small add-on acquisitions sometimes is just worth it just to get access to the crew or the leadership there, and fold them into your operation. So definitely something you see a lot. Karl, anything I didn't ask you that you would want to share with the audience? This was a great conversation.
We didn't get into like kind of getting to know the team and building trust with them and all that stuff. That's something that's I think is always interesting and challenging, especially coming from the outside. And I was nervous about this, not having a background in audio engineering. Am I going to be credible, or like, are they going to be like, is this, jerk off? And so far that has not been, everybody's been great. The interesting thing about it, like, again, this goes back to the digital businesses. In a remote culture like this, there's not a lot of meetings and need for like in-person interaction. And a lot of the employees' relationship with us is a lot more, I'll say, like light and hands-off than you might think in a traditional business. Yep. Because they kind of treat it as, and this is not a negative. This is just how it is like they clock in, they do their work, they go out and do whatever the hell they love to do, right? They're with their families, they're just, living life. And it's a huge perk for them, and they don't need to have a bunch of culture building at work. Work is work. It stays at work, and they don't want to, do a bunch. So we are going to start doing some of that with the core team, the like more full-time people, but our like huge base of editors there, it's like, they don't really want us to go in and mess with things. They're like, as long as things stay the same and I'm getting paid, whatever, you guys, good, new owners, that's fine. It hasn't been very, no negatives there. So I think that's really interesting and something to think about as you amalgamate into the new company. It's like, what is the culture that was already there? And do you fit with that style, or are you going to come in and try to like force a square peg into a round hole? Like if we, all of a sudden tell all the editors, we're going to make you, zoom in every Friday at 3, like that would totally break the good thing they have going.
Totally. What a great point, Karl. And just two things to add to that. First of all, you had said earlier about folks in maybe in your editors are in expensive countries, but they're maybe in more rural areas, and so this is a job for them that they might not otherwise be able to get, and it's a great job. But part of it being a great job is that they can live kind of far away and they don't have to commute into a business or whatever. And so the appeal of the job, and part of the reason they're working for you, is precisely so they don't have to do meetings. There isn't a lot of overhead to their day-to-day.
Yep.
And then just the kind of the larger point about not coming into a business and all gung-ho about anything, really. Come in to listen and to really learn and really get a sense of what the existing culture is. Because if you come in with preconceived notions, you really risk disrupting what's already there and the reason there's value baked into the business in the first place. So, you got to be a little bit more reactive than some people who have the initiative and have the chutzpah to go out and buy a business naturally are go-getters and probably want to put their imprint on things. But so actually, I'm just, as I think this through, it's like all this energy, all this willpower, all this like walking through walls to get a deal done. And then you got to pump your own brakes to be like, okay, I got to bring forward my beta self, not my alpha self, my beta self, and be like a listener and be calm and react to it.
And it's like you bought the business because it was a good business, right? And that's why I say to everybody when they ask, "Are you going to come in and change things?" I'm like, I bought it because it's a good business. It on paper should keep working the way it did before we bought it. You know what I mean? Like I didn't buy it because it had all these big problems I need to go fix. Yeah. There's some little things like, again, you can try the little quick wins just to help build some trust and credibility. But there's no need to go in and try to change the model or the pricing or the big stuff on day one. I mean, I'd like sit back and learn the customers, learn what's important, and then you can start to roll that stuff out as it makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really glad you brought that up, Karl. Karl, how can people get in touch? How do you prefer people reach out?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn at Karl L. Hughes, and you can always put that it's Karl with a K, so that'll probably trip you up if you're listening. And then I write about this stuff at least once a month or so on my blog and newsletter there. So if you ever want to, just follow along, that's a fun way to keep up. But I'm also happy to answer emails. You can email Karl at draft.dev or Karl at thepodcastconsultant.com, and both those go to me. Because I always like talking to other searchers or people out here in the acquisition world that are just like learning, because I learned a ton from the people who like on the show and people I talk to one-on-one. So I'm always happy to give that back.
Appreciate the offer, Karl. Thank you very much for coming on. What a fun conversation and story. And I'm so eager to see what next year looks like.
Thanks, Will.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week. So tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.